When stability feels normal, that's the danger. Kyoto, Japan, spring of 1989. The cherry blossoms are blooming along the philosopher's path. Businessmen in charcoal suits walk beneath them, carrying leather briefcases stuffed with land deeds and stock certificates. The Imperial Palace grounds, a square mile of central Tokyo real estate, has just been valued at more than the entire state of California. A single ward of Tokyo is worth more than all the property in Canada. The Japanese stock market has risen for 15 consecutive years without a single major correction. Stability feels so permanent that banks have begun lending 100-year mortgages. Young couples are told they can never afford property unless their grandparents help them. The word bubble does not yet exist in common financial vocabulary. What exists instead is a quiet, absolute conviction that this is simply how the world works now. 3 years later, the same businessmen are riding the same trains to the same addresses, but their briefcases are empty. The land under the Imperial Palace has lost 80% of its value. The Nikkei index sits at 1/3 of its peak. A generation of retirement savings has evaporated, and no single event caused it. No invasion, no oil shock, no pandemic. The crash happened because stability became a religion, and when a system worships stability, it stops preparing for anything else. This is the myth that must be broken, that long periods of economic calm are healthy. They are not. Long periods of calm are the most dangerous condition an economy can experience. They allow leverage to accumulate silently. They allow institutional memory to decay. They allow an entire population to confuse the absence of recent disaster with the presence of permanent safety. History offers 3 case studies of this exact pattern. The first is the Roman Empire under the 5 good emperors from 96 to 180 AD. For 84 years, Roman trade routes were secure, tax revenues were predictable, and the currency held its weight in silver. Stability felt so normal that emperors stopped maintaining the frontier legions. When the first real external shock arrived in 166 AD, the Antonine Plague, the system fractured not because the plague was uniquely deadly, but because the muscle of resilience had atrophied. The economy took over a century to recover. The second case is the United States between 1992 and 1999. The Cold War had ended. Inflation had been tamed. The federal budget was heading toward surplus. Technology promised infinite productivity. Markets rose with such reliability that the Federal Reserve Chairman famously questioned whether the old rules of valuation still applied. And then, in March 2000, without any single trigger, the dot-com bubble broke. Not because the Internet was a bad idea, because 3,000% gains over 8 years had taught investors that risk had been abolished. The third case is Northern Europe from 2004 to 2007. Germany had restructured. Spain was building infrastructure. Ireland was the Celtic tiger. European financial institutions began holding each other's sovereign debt as if default had been outlawed by treaty. When Lehman Brothers failed in September 2008, the entire European banking system required rescue within a single week. The stability of monetary union had masked the fragility of the banks that depended on it. Here is the numbered framework that explains why stability is the true danger. 1. The memory decay function. The human brain rewrites risk perception based on recent experience. After 5 years without a recession, your brain begins to believe recessions are rare. After 10 years, it believes they are impossible. This is not ignorance. This is neurological efficiency. The problem is that credit cycles operate on 7 to 12-year rhythms. By the time your brain has forgotten the last crash, the seeds of the next one are already ripe. 2. The leverage creep invisible. In stable times, borrowing feels intelligent. Why keep cash earning 0% when you can borrow at 4% and earn 8% on real estate or stocks? Each individual decision is rational, but the aggregate effect is a slow, invisible expansion of total system debt. When the turn comes, and it always comes, that debt does not disappear, it simply changes owners. The wealthy sell their assets to the over-leveraged in the final months. Then they buy them back at auction. 3. The institutional amnesia effect. Corporate risk managers, central bankers and pension fund trustees are replaced every 5 to 7 years. The people who lived through the last crisis retire. Their successors build models based on the stable period they have personally experienced. They calibrate stress tests to the worst downturn in their memory. If their memory contains no downturn, they calibrate to nothing. This is how a bank in 2007 could hold AA-rated mortgage bonds that were actually junk. No one in the risk department had ever seen a housing crash. 4. The narrative lock-in. After a decade of stability, the media, politicians and financial advisors develop a shared story about why this time is different. It is always different. The Japanese story was land scarcity. The American story was the internet. The European story was monetary union. The current story is artificial intelligence and onshoring. The content of the story does not matter. What matters is the function to explain away the possibility of reversal so that no one has to prepare for it. The modern relevance is uncomfortable to state plainly. As of this writing, major global economies have experienced 16 years without a true systemic financial crisis, outside the pandemic disruption which was exogenous and met with unprecedented money printing. The United States equity market has more than tripled from its 2009 low. Corporate debt as a percentage of GDP stands near all-time highs in China, the United States, and Europe. Commercial real estate vacancies in major cities remain elevated from work-from-home shifts that occurred 4 years ago. And yet, financial conditions indexes show that markets are pricing in the lowest perceived risk since 2007. The philosophical conclusion is not that a crash is imminent next week. The conclusion is more precise and more difficult. Stability is not safety. Stability is the precondition for the most dangerous kind of fragility, the kind that no one sees because everyone has decided to stop looking. The Japanese businessman in 1989 did not make a foolish decision when he bought his 100-year mortgage. He made the perfectly rational decision given the information available. The information was incomplete because the system had trained him not to ask about the unthinkable. When stability feels normal, that is the moment to ask the one question that everyone else has stopped asking. What is breaking silently? Right. Now that we will only notice when it is too late to fix. The answer will determine who transfers wealth and who loses it in the next 5 years.